The kingship is mine, but I'm going to come serving until my time comes. Remember, Jesus' time did not come until what? All power in heaven and earth has been given unto me, Matthew 28, verse 19. What had to happen before then? Though he was son, Hebrews 5, verse 8, though he was son, yet learned he obedience by the things that he suffered. And being made perfect, he became what? The author of eternal salvation to all them that obey him. You see, Jesus had to learn obedience. He had to get an education in humanity before he could say all power in heaven and earth has been given unto me. And he did it humbly. Humbly, folks. Humbly. And then the next thing, the story of David and Goliath. He's still a boy. Let's look at chapter 17. We're going to race through this in about 3 minutes, and then I want to bring some things home for our own application and practicality. The Philistines gathered their forces and assembled at Sakar in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes, Dimim, between Sakar and Ezekah. Saul, Israelites assembled on the other side, one side the Philistines, and then a champion comes out in verse 4 named Goliath, standing 9 feet tall. All Israel trembled in fear of this giant. The Greeks, the Athenians, the Spartans, many times instead of doing battle with one another, they'd send a champion forward. The Greeks were famous for that. And this is what the Philistines, their cousins, this is where the Greeks borrowed that from. The Philistines, their cousins, all right, sending a champion forth, and their champion was Goliath, and Israel had no champion. The champion was supposed to be Saul, but the Spirit of God had departed from Saul. And Saul was no longer the strong, faithful man that he had been in the early kingship. He was now a faithless man, driven by his emotions and feelings and his disobedience. He knew the Lord was not with him. He knew the Lord's Spirit had departed from him, and therefore he was afraid. And he had a reason to be afraid. But the king would not champion God's cause. And so Goliath, day by day, for 40 days, Goliath went out and cursed the armies of the living God. All right? Cursed the armies of the living God. He dared people to come out. In verse 8, why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me if he's able and fight against me. If he defeats me, we become your servants. If I defeat him, you become our servants. You become our slaves. Then it says, David is sent by his father to see how 3 of his brothers who are serving in the army, sent by his father, 3 of his brothers are serving in the army, to see how they're faring and to bring them some food. And when David comes up, he notices something, and he asks some questions, and then David makes some statements. When he reached the camp, look at verse 25. David says, it says, now the Israelites had been saying, do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth and his daughter to the man who kills this man, exempted from taxes. David asked the men standing near him, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace? He calls Saul a disgrace from Israel. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God. Look at the man's faith, folks. The man's faith. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine? David is not looking at the size. David is not looking at the strength of this man. Why? Because David is looking at Goliath with the same eye that God looked at him. You see, God looks not on the outward, but the inward. Amen? How many times, Sam? How many times, Eric, have you met a guy, big, brute, and look hard and everything, but had no heart? Okay? Okay, made mincemeat of him, all right? All right, made mincemeat of him because he had nothing inside. And there are some thugs who can see that. There are some tough guys in the streets who can see that. But David had even a better eye than that. He was faithful to God, believed in God, therefore he developed an eye like God. And therefore was not afraid. Who is this man that he should defy the armies of the living God? They repeated and told David, this is what will be done for the guy who kills him. Now watch what Eliab, David's brother, says in verse 28. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave the few sheep in the desert? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. You see how despised he is of his oldest brother? Okay? His other brothers didn't come in defense because I believe that their silence was consent. They despised him too. This youngest brother, what are you doing down here? We are afraid of Goliath. We are afraid. We're trembling, and we've been trembling for 40 days, and we're going to keep trembling. Why have you come down here? We're not going to fight. We're scared of Goliath. And man, oh man, you get on out of here. We are comfortable with our fear. We're comfortable with this disgrace. We're comfortable with this humiliation. We're comfortable with our horrible state. And David, once again, God's choice as a king. You see that? You see why God chose David now, folks? You see that? I mean, do you see it? If you see it, say amen, all right? All right. All of the brothers were trembling with fear with the rest of Israel. But God knew this guy's heart as a boy. God could see the end from the beginning. He knew there would be a Goliath, and he knew he would need a boy king to show the adult king, the Saul king, and Israel what kingship and leadership is all about. Believing in the power of God, the presence of God, providence of God. Okay? And that's what David believed as a child. All right, now notice what he says. Dropping down, it says, David said to Saul, let no one lose heart. This is verse 32. On account of this Philistine, your servant will go and fight him. David says, the boy says, to the king. The boy king says to the man king, the tribe king, the king who stood, once again, Saul was what? Head and shoulders above every Israelite, right? Chapter 9. Chapter 9, a big guy. But Goliath was bigger, and Saul was scared. The most natural person to go out and fight Goliath would be the biggest man in Israel, amen? But this small boy said, I'll fight him. What is this small boy doing? He's taking the lead, amen? He's taking the lead, all right? He's taking the lead in the war against the enemies of Israel.